You owe us for raising you! My dad screamed when I refused to give him more money. I just said okay, and cut him off. A month later, he showed up at my work. My dad's voice thundered through the phone, the same tone he'd used on me since I was a teenager, sharp, authoritative, final. But this time, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just exhaled and said, okay. Then I hung up. For the first time in my life, I walked away. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, heart pounding in my chest. I half expected my dad to call back, to double down on his anger. But when my phone stayed silent, a different kind of feeling settled over me. Relief. No more frantic calls asking for rent money when they had just gone on a vacation. No more guilt trips about how family supports family, when they had never supported me. No more nights staring at my bank account, wondering how I was going to pay my own bills after handing over another loan I knew I'd never see again. This wasn't new. It had started the moment I got my first paycheck at 16. My parents treated me like their personal safety net, always expecting me to cover the gaps in their reckless spending. At first, it was small, gas money here, a bill there. Then, as I got older, the demands grew. And I let it happen. Because they were my parents. Because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Because every time I hesitated, my dad would remind me, who fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head? You owe us. But that night, something in me snapped. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their safety net. I was done. And I had no idea what was coming next. The first few days after I cut them off were eerily quiet. No calls. No texts. I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting my mom to send one of her guilt-ridden messages. We're family, honey. We just need a little help. Or my dad to demand I stop being dramatic. But there was nothing. It felt unsettling. I had spent years conditioned to respond to their every financial whim. Whenever they needed money, I gave it, sometimes without even questioning it. The silence now was like standing in a familiar room only to realize all the furniture had been rearranged. I should have felt guilty. Maybe even a little afraid of what would happen next. Instead, I felt something else. Free. For the first time in years, my paycheck was mine. I didn't have to mentally subtract a portion of it before I even got paid, knowing it would go straight to them. I paid my bills on time. I bought myself groceries without calculating if I could afford to send them a few hundred extra. Just this once. I even went out for dinner, something I hadn't done in months. The weight on my shoulders had always been there. I just never realized how heavy it was until it was gone. But peace never lasts long when you're dealing with people like my parents. And a month later, my father proved that. In the worst way possible. I was halfway through my shift when I heard my name. Where is he? The voice was unmistakable, sharp, commanding, and laced with barely contained anger. My stomach dropped. I turned from my desk just in time to see my father storming into my workplace, his face red with fury. Behind him, the receptionist hurried to catch up, looking flustered. Sir, you can't just barge in here. I need to speak to my son. My dad snapped, his eyes locking onto me. My coworkers, people who had no idea about my family drama, stopped what they were doing to stare. Conversations died. Phones remained unanswered. It was as if the entire office had frozen, watching the scene unfold. I stood up slowly, forcing myself to remain calm. Dad, you can't be here, I said evenly. His lip curled. Oh, I can't come talk to my own son when he's ruining his family? I clenched my jaw. Lower your voice. That only made him louder. You think you're a big man now, huh? You cut us off and suddenly you don't owe us anything? After all we've done for you? He stepped closer, pointing a finger at my chest. You think you're better than us? I could feel every pair of eyes in the office on me. My boss was in his office across the room, watching with a carefully blank expression. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay composed. I'm at work, Dad. You need to leave. His expression twisted with disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend that I wasn't backing down. You ungrateful little. Sir? A new voice cut in. Security. A tall, no-nonsense guard stepped beside me, arms crossed. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. My father looked at him, then back at me. He was shaking with rage. This isn't over, he hissed. But I didn't flinch. He had humiliated me in front of my entire workplace. And that was the moment I knew there was no going back. I was done with him for good. As security escorted my father out, the office remained silent. No one quite knew what to say. I stood there, heart pounding, my hands gripping the edge of my desk. Then, like clockwork, the whispers started. Was that his dad? What was that about? Dude, that was insane. I didn't care. Let them talk. What I did care about was my boss stepping out of his office, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. Can I see you for a moment? He said. I followed him inside, shutting the door behind me. For a second, he just studied me. Then he sighed. You okay? I blinked. That wasn't the reaction I expected. Yeah? He nodded, rubbing his temples. Look, I don't know what's going on with your family, and honestly, it's none of my business. But I can't have people storming in here like that. It's disruptive. I nodded. I understand. It won't happen again. A pause. Then he leaned forward. Do you need some time off? That was when it hit me. He wasn't just annoyed. He was concerned. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. No, I'm good. He gave me a long look, then nodded. All right. Get back to work. I walked out of his office, still feeling the weight of what had just happened. But instead of shame, I felt something else. Finality. My father had just given me the perfect excuse to cut him off completely. No second guessing. No guilt. He had made a scene, in public, in front of my boss and coworkers. There was no fixing this. And for the first time, I was truly okay with that. The moment I sat back down at my desk, my phone started buzzing. I didn't have to look to know who it was. First, it was my mother. Then my father again. Then my mother once more. I silenced my phone and stared at my computer screen, pretending to focus. But my hands were still shaking slightly, the adrenaline from my father's outburst not yet gone. It didn't take long before the texts started coming in. Mom, what happened? Your father just got home. He said you embarrassed him at your job. Mom, why didn't you just talk to him? You know how he gets. Mom, he's your father. You owe him respect. Dad, you crossed the line today? If you think you can just cut us off like we're nothing, you've got another thing coming. I exhaled slowly and locked my phone. I was done engaging. For the rest of the day, I threw myself into work. My coworkers were watching me, some of them sneaking awkward glances my way, but no one outright asked me about what had happened. I appreciated that. The last thing I needed was to rehash the disaster that had just unfolded. By the time my shift ended, I felt drained. I left the office without saying much to anyone, walking straight to my car. The evening air was crisp, but I barely noticed it. My mind was already preparing for what I knew would come next. And sure enough, when I got home, I saw I had another 20 missed calls. This time, from extended family. Uncle Robert, hey, I just got off the phone with your dad. What's going on? Cousin Jake, dude, your dad is saying you disrespected him at your job? Aunt Carol, sweetheart, whatever this is, it's not worth breaking up the family over. Just call them back. I clenched my jaw. This was their pattern. Whenever I set a boundary, my parents made sure to get the entire family involved. They played the victims, twisting the story, making it seem like I was the unreasonable one. Like I had betrayed them. I wasn't falling for it this time. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and ignored it. Instead, I made myself a real dinner, something I hadn't done in months. I wasn't living off ramen and frozen meals anymore, scraping by because I had to send money to my parents before paying my own bills. This time, I ate without guilt. I was finally free. But my father? He wasn't done yet. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages. My father had clearly spent the night stewing in his anger, and now he was doubling down. Dad, you think this is over? Dad, you humiliated me in front of strangers like I'm some beggar. After everything we've done for you. Dad, you need to come over and apologize. We'll talk about how you're going to make this right. Mom, just call him. Please. He's upset. I stared at the messages, unmoved. It was almost funny. My father had stormed into my workplace, made a public spectacle of himself, and now he expected me to apologize? Not happening. I left the messages unread and got ready for work. When I arrived at the office, things felt different. My coworkers still threw occasional glances my way, but the awkwardness from the day before had faded. Business went on as usual. That is, until around noon. I was at my desk when my manager walked up. Hey, he said, his tone casual but firm. Can I talk to you for a second? I nodded, standing up and following him into his office. The door closed behind me, and he gestured for me to sit. Listen, he began. I wasn't going to bring this up, but your father called the office this morning. I blinked. What? My manager sighed, rubbing his temples. Yeah. Apparently, he demanded to speak to my boss, wanted to explain what happened yesterday. I felt my stomach drop. He called corporate? I asked. He tried. My manager confirmed. But luckily, I got the call first. I shut it down before it could go anywhere. I exhaled, relieved but furious. How far was my father willing to go? My manager leaned back in his chair. I'm not here to judge your personal life, but I need to know, is this going to keep happening? I clenched my fists. No. I'll make sure of it. He nodded. Good. Because I like you. You do good work. But if this keeps up, it's going to become a problem. I understood what he was really saying. I was on thin ice. Not because of my own actions, but because my father wouldn't let this go. I walked out of his office feeling a mix of anger and humiliation. This was a new low, even for my dad. He wasn't just trying to guilt-trip me anymore. He was trying to ruin me. I knew then that ignoring him wasn't enough. I had to send a message he couldn't ignore. So that night, I blocked everyone. My father. My mother. The aunts, uncles, and cousins who had taken his side without even hearing mine. And just for good measure, I called my phone provider and changed my number. This time, I was making sure there was no way for him to reach me. But I underestimated just how desperate he could get. Because 2 days later, he showed up at my apartment. 2 days of silence. It was almost eerie how quickly everything had gone quiet. No calls. No texts. No sudden visits to my job. For the first time in years, I felt like I had complete control over my life. Then, late in the evening, just as I was about to sit down for dinner, there was a loud, insistent banging at my door. I already knew who it was before I even checked the peephole. My father. I sighed, debating whether to ignore it. But something told me he wouldn't leave quietly. When I opened the door, he was standing there, arms crossed, face twisted with frustration. He looked like a man who had spent 2 days stewing in his own anger, waiting for the moment he could unleash it. You changed your number? He asked, voice low and controlled. Yes. His eye twitched. So that's it? You think you can just erase us? I folded my arms. I think I can choose not to be treated like a walking ATM. That set him off. You owe us, he snapped, stepping forward. Who raised you? Who put food in your mouth, clothes on your back? You wouldn't have any of this without us. He gestured wildly at my apartment, as if he had built it brick by brick. I took a deep breath. I had heard this speech 1,000 times. I never said I wasn't grateful for being raised. I said, voice steady. But that doesn't mean I'm indebted to you for life. That's not how this works. His face darkened. You think you're better than us now, huh? Got your little job, your little apartment, and suddenly you don't need your family? I clenched my jaw. You made it clear a long time ago that family only matters when it benefits you. His nostrils flared, his fists tightening at his sides. For a second, I thought he might actually try something. But instead, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "One day, when you're all alone, when you need help, you'll remember this moment. And you'll realize how selfish you were." I met his gaze, unwavering. "No, Dad. One day, when you really need help, you'll realize how selfish you were." His expression flickered, just for a second. Like he had actually felt the weight of those words. But then, just as quickly, the anger returned. "Don't bother crawling back when life humbles you." He spat before turning on his heel and storming off. I watched him go, waiting for the usual pang of guilt to hit me. But this time? It never came. I closed the door and locked it. And for the first time, I knew, really knew, that I was finally free. After my father left, I expected some kind of fallout. I braced myself for more phone calls from extended family, for angry emails, for sudden knocks at my door in the middle of the night. I had seen how my parents operated for years. When guilt didn't work, they escalated. When that didn't work, they played the victim. But this time? Nothing. A week passed. Then 2. Then a full month. It was like they had finally realized I wasn't playing their game anymore. At first, it felt weird. I had spent my entire adult life tied to them, weighed down by their demands, shaping my financial decisions around their constant emergencies. Now my money was mine. My time was mine. I paid my rent without worrying if they needed a little extra. That month, I bought myself things I had put off for years: a new laptop, better clothes, even a gym membership. Not extravagant, but things that made my life better. I even started saving for the future. For my future. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from my cousin, Rachel. "Rachel, hey, I know things are bad with your parents, but I thought you should know." She sent a screenshot. It was a Facebook post from my mother. A long, dramatic paragraph about how some people forget where they came from. About how families should stick together. And how certain ungrateful children throw away the people who raised them the moment they don't benefit from them anymore. At the bottom, dozens of comments from relatives chiming in. "So sorry you're dealing with this, sis. He'll come back when he realizes he needs you. You did your best raising him, but some kids just don't appreciate anything." I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. A few months ago, this would have destroyed me. I would have felt guilty, desperate to explain my side, desperate to make them understand why I had to cut them off. But now, I just sighed and put my phone down. This was their final attempt at control, a last-ditch effort to rewrite the story so that they were the victims and I was the villain. Let them have it. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my life back. And I wasn't giving it up for anything. Days turned into weeks, and life moved on. I expected my parents to try again, to find some new way to drag me back into their web of manipulation. But aside from the occasional passive-aggressive social media posts, they stayed silent. I wasn't naive enough to think they had changed. No, they had just given up on me. And I was fine with that. For the first time in my life, I had complete control over my decisions. No more last-minute financial rescues. No more guilt trips about helping family. No more feeling obligated to set myself on fire just to keep them warm. And the more distance I put between us, the clearer everything became. I started to see just how much of my life I had given up for them. I had spent years working overtime, skipping vacations, ignoring my own dreams, all so my parents could continue their reckless spending without consequences. They weren't struggling. They weren't drowning. They had been using me as a safety net so they could live comfortably without effort. The realization made me sick. But it also strengthened my resolve. I wouldn't just be free from them. I would make sure I never became them. So I started making changes. I met with a financial advisor, something I should have done years ago. I put money into savings, set goals, and planned for the future, a future that no longer revolved around their needs. I reconnected with friends, the ones I had drifted away from because I was always too exhausted or too broke to go out. I built new routines, focused on my health, and even picked up a few hobbies I had long abandoned. Most of all, I let go of the guilt. For years I had believed that cutting them off made me a bad son. That I was supposed to sacrifice for them no matter how badly they treated me. But now I saw the truth. I wasn't a bad son. I was just finally choosing myself. And that was something they could never take away from me again. Months passed, and the absence of my parents in my life became my new normal. No more surprise visits. No more guilt-ridden texts. No more scrambling to cover their financial mistakes. At first, I thought I'd feel empty without them, like something was missing. But the truth? I had never felt lighter. One evening, as I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city skyline, I thought about everything that had happened. How different my life was now. I no longer flinched when my phone rang, worried it was another demand for money. I no longer spent nights lying awake, stressing over bills that weren't even mine. I was finally living for myself. Then, out of the blue, an email popped up on my phone. Subject: Are you happy now? I already knew who it was from. My mother. For a second, I debated deleting it without reading. But curiosity won. It was exactly what I expected, more emotional manipulation. Mom, I hope you're happy with what you've done. You abandoned your family. You let your father suffer. We had to make hard choices because of you. But I guess that doesn't matter, does it? Mom, one day you'll regret this. One day, you'll realize you needed us. And by then, it'll be too late. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, without hesitation, I deleted the email. No response. No anger. No guilt. Just peace. Because the truth was, I didn't need them.